why you have the kind of gangster stuff in Japan? Is that how that works?
Absolutely. Well, the whole purpose of the yakuza, the gangster, we think of the yakuza as like the mafia, and it is in that one respect, because much of the mafia activity is basically providing and guaranteeing protection. You know, I've explained before, but if you want to guarantee that someone will pay you for the cow, you have a yakuza there at the transaction, and they guarantee that the payment will be made. So in an insecure political environment, you have protection agencies. And if you look where the yakuza work, they work in those semi-legal, semi-illegal areas where the government cannot get in, which is things like drugs, entertainment, prostitution, these sorts of area. The yakuza ensure policing within those areas. Now the yakuza you don't have yakuza going with suitcases of yen to ministers, but in each police box in Japan, they have a list of the local yakuza. And if there's trouble anywhere, they say, you know, what are you doing? You know, you should be sorting this out. You are kind of local constables working for us for free. You rake off what you rake off, but we don't have the trouble of trying to get involved in this, which often usually leads to corruption anyway of the police. So the yakuza are part of this. Now, what this basically shows is that corruption is necessary. We think of it as an evil, but actually, in many ways, within limits, and once you understand how the system works, it's an efficient alternative, in this case, to the political and taxation system. But I had a colleague of mine who became famous because he invented an important concept in economic anthropology, which was the concept of the informal economy, or the black economy. He worked in Ghana, and he was a kind of Manchester lad from Manchester Grammar School named Keith Hart. And Keith was as he thought of himself, a street savvy sort of guy. And so when he went off to do his PhD in Ghana, he didn't sort of sit out in some tribal region. He mixed in with the people, and he became part of the street culture of Ghanaian cities. And he saw what was going on, which was basically an informal sector right outside the formal economy. This is the kind of barter economy and paying off and all this. And he saw that these women traders who were famous there and so on, they weren't, you know, you never saw them on any directory of local traders or people who paid any tax or anything, but they were the black or informal economy. Without them, the Ghanaian economy would collapse. Sort of 70% of what happened in this was in this informal sector, and it was absolutely essential. It was opposed to bureaucratization and formalization, but it was, and this concept became generalized. It's the system that works basically in Latin America, in India, in most of the world, most of the economy. And of course, Bitcoin and modern sort of barter systems that are being developed to get round surveillance, as it were, they're part of this informal economy, which is growing. And without it, the system dries up, it becomes too rigid. So in any form of life, you have to have, it's a sort of anti-iron cage, anti-bureaucratic, anti-formalization.
So this is a kind of enchanted economy, isn't it? This is kind of like...
You've coined the phrase there, the enchanted economy. Exactly. And without it, without the sort of mixing in and reestablishing of relations, so that you, I mean, it was discovered, for example, in shopkeeping in a famous book on The Irish Countryman by Arensberg, he showed that the relationship between a shopkeeper and his or her clients was not a directly economic one, it was a social one as well. So, I mean, the famous finding there was that basically you have a social relationship to the person who sells you things, and you're always in debt to them. So you go in and you get things on credit all the time. It was rather like Oxford and Cambridge undergraduates. While they were undergraduates, you know, they ran up huge bills at the local wine merchants and clothing shops. And, you know, the person knew this was the young man from Trinity, and I'd known his father, and, you know, he'll pay it when he becomes the Earl of so-and-so. It doesn't matter for now. You basically subsidize them. And in Ireland, if you owed a chunk of money to your local shop, if you went in there with the money and you handed over the shopkeeper, they were furious. Because basically, it's like the Mausian gift. You deaden the spirit of the relationship. You pay for it. We even have it with much of our lives. For example, when someone buys a round of drinks, you don't pay them directly. You let them pay the round of drinks, and then 5 rounds later, you buy a round of drinks. And so we don't like this direct exchange system. So all this informal ways of mixing spheres, which gives it a human feeling and so on. So corruption and trying to absolutely stamp it out, because the only way you can stamp it out is through surveillance and intense bureaucratization. So, for example, a good deal of what destroyed the schools you were in and destroyed the university I've taught in was the fear of corruption. Basically, we don't trust you. So paper trails, accountancy, making everything visible. Because what happens is that very often is that there is a case of corruption occurs. And in the old days, you'd say, oh, well, Bloggs, you know, he's been a bit corrupt. We'll either pension him off or give him a reprimand. Now, someone brings a very expensive case, as happened in Cambridge, for example, that they hadn't been promoted because of corruption. All the people who were on the committee, of which I was one member, or not that one, but anyway, were males. And they disliked me personally, and I never get a promotion. And they bring a entirely spurious, because they're no good anyway, but spurious legal case, which goes on for years, costs the university hundreds of thousands of pounds. Or it might be child, you know, sexual abuse or whatever it is. The university learns from this that you've got to bureaucratize this. So within 1 year, when I was head of a committee for promotions, we went from a system where we would meet, you know, once a year, and I'd give the other 3 people a glass of sherry, and we'd say, oh, you've got Buggins in your department and we've got Fred in my department, and which one shall we suggest is promoted? And they'd say, oh, well, I think Buggins, he's been here longer and, you know, he's written this good book recently. How about we let him have a chance? Okay. And then, you know, after an hour, it's all settled. That was the corrupt old system. After that, it was a month's work, you know, 6 external referees, 6 internal referees, first stage, rights of appeal, God knows. And finally, after wasting days, weeks of academic life, you had a solution which couldn't be challenged so easily in court because you had all the paperwork.